Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining Synthetic Intelligence Forum online. My name is Vic, and I'm the host of the Synthetic Intelligence Forum. I'm very happy to welcome you to an online panel discussion today about advanced analytics in banking. And we have a great lineup of panelists today who'll share their insights and foresight with us. But before we go into that, I want to talk a little bit about the lineup of events we have coming up in the weeks ahead. Next week, we're going to continue the topic on this topic of advanced analytics in banking, and we'll hear from other colleagues in the banking space, leaders in the advanced analytics space, applying them to different aspects, different areas, different lines of business in the bank, and they'll share with us their thoughts and their perspectives on the roles, the opportunities, the challenges, and the strengths of the various solutions and technologies out there. This would be basically our fifth panel discussion in a row. And, we like to mix things up. So sometimes we do panel discussions. Other times we do fireside chat. Sometimes we do presentations. So the week after that, we're going to have an online fireside chat with Ron Bodkin, who is the Chief Information Officer at the Vector Institute and the Vice President of Applied AI Engineering, or Vice President of AI Engineering. So make sure you add these sessions in your calendar. Now, the topic of AI in banking is very near and dear to the Synthetic Intelligence Forum, because when we used to do events in person, this used to be the topic that would generate a lot of interest, and we'd have a lot of people come to join our sessions in person. I'll show you a couple of pictures from back then when we had events with all five of the banks represented, and we had a full house. We did other events with other folks from all of the big banks as well, and presentation panel discussions all mixed in. And related also to the topic of banking, we also had folks who used to join us from the financial services more broadly, the fintech space as well. So we used to do events like that as well. This was an event we did where one of our panelists today had joined us in the past. This was done at the DMZ, and then other events we did again on this topic, which we did at Queen's University. So this is an important topic overall, AI in banking, and then also more broadly, AI in fintech and financial services. So I'm very excited to welcome you to the session today. We have one panelist who's having slight technical difficulties in joining. So we'll start with the two panel discussants we have today. And when the third panelist joins us, then we'll also add them to the stream as well. So without further ado, let's get this on the road. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining the Synthetic Intelligence Forum online. My name is Vic, and I'm delighted to welcome you to what promises to be an excellent conversation about advanced analytics in banking. I'm very happy to be joined by two leaders in this field from the world of banking in the space of advanced analytics, and proud to call them my friend. So without further ado, I'll invite to the stream Nazia, who joins us from the Royal Bank of Canada. And also I'd like to invite to the stream Andy, who joins us from Scotiabank. And what I want to start by asking Nazia first is, Nazia, tell us a little bit about your role and focus in on how it relates to advanced analytics. Over to you.
Thanks, Vic. Hi, everyone. I'm Nazia, and really excited to be here today. I'm currently a senior director at RBC, focused on strategy and delivery of data-related. I'm currently building capability around real-time data, AI-based regulatory impact assessments, data discovery, data quality, and quite a few other data management and governance-focused capabilities. These become really important in AI. So let's take something as simple as data discovery. In an organization like a bank, there are lots of data. And when you get data scientists in, one of the first questions they will ask is, what data do we have? And building capabilities around data discovery will enable them to find what we have inside the organization. That's just one example, but I build foundational capabilities to allow our data scientists and data engineers to do their job.
Oh, that's excellent, Nazia. Thank you so much for sharing that perspective. Same question for you, Andy.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much, Vic, for inviting me back on this forum. I'm excited to be here. My name is Andy Moshir-Vaziri, and I'm a director in strategic initiatives within Customer Office, which is a brand new department within our organization. And I specifically roll up to retail customer value team who in our wider organization, wider department, what we focus on is how can we enhance the customer experience, enhance our customer growth, focus on the retention, as well as how can we enhance the experience that the customers are going through. And specifically around applications of AI is really understanding the value of our customers. How can we enhance and provide them with specialized advice, as well as being able to predict where our growth are and where our retention focus should be.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that, Andy. So I think the first question that everybody would like to hear an answer to is we always read about banks being amongst the most avant-garde, the early adopters of advanced analytics technologies, whether it's know your customer, whether it's anti-money laundering, all types of interesting use cases, credit scoring, risk management. So tell us a little bit in your professional opinion, what are most exciting developments in the field of advanced analytics, AI, data science, machine learning, etc., that you are most excited about in the context of applications to banking? So Andy, let's keep it with you for now.
Thanks, Vic. Definitely, you touched on really key areas that have started off with building AI capabilities. So I think if I look holistically across the bank, departments like global risk management have been one of the early adopters of AI and advanced analytics, where for credit decisioning, AML, or fraud analytics, they have been able to deploy a lot of advanced analytic models, and that capability have now expanded to more business line and kind of enhancing the customer experience more so, and creating those moments of truth for customers. And now it's in a stage that we can provide specialized and personalized advice. And not only that, but also being able to gain the trust of our customers and serve them better. So if I look back within this 1 or 2 years, what we were very excited and almost proud of was the fact how Scotiabank handled the pandemic. In the early days of the pandemic, Scotia really leveraged data and analytics teams to put a solution out there to build the COVID relief, financial relief programs, and very quickly be able to provide financial reliefs to these customers. And not only that, but also being able to use advanced analytics to predict those customers who are vulnerable. And based on the industry they were in, based on the financial state that they were in, being able to not only predict that they are going through a rough time, but also working with the other business line and our frontline staff, being able to reach out to these customers and ask them to see if they need any help or provide them with financial advice. So that was a moment of truth, that we were there for the customers, and they were very appreciative of that, and we were very proud. But what we are also very excited about now is the fact that Scotia just launched their CME platform, which is our Canadian marketing and engagement engine. We are very excited about, because that will enable us to be able to provide specialized and personalized advice and offers to our customers, depending on how they are behaving within our ecosystem. So you would imagine through their interactions with us, whether through the way that they behave, they come to branches, the interactions they have, call center, our Nova application, or mobile, or our online applications, we can see how they are, what they are actually looking for, what financial state they are in, to be able to provide those specialized advice. So that's something that we are very excited about.
That's perfect, Andy. And I'm also happy to note that Indrani's joined us. So Indrani, welcome to the stream. And I'd like to start by asking you the question that I just asked your co-panelists, Nazia and Andy, is tell us a little bit, Indrani, about your role and how it relates to advanced analytics in the banking context.
Nice. Thanks for having me today. So I work for CIBC in this team called Fraud Fusion. So what we do is we bring in data sets from across the bank and other third-party data, and provide a platform to for fraud analysts to kind of run their models. We take their models, could be machine learning models, and productionize the pipelines, and also maintain all of the infrastructure we need, like our OpenShift Kubernetes cluster, we do data engineering, we do ML engineering, we do DevOps. To answer your question, I guess all of the models, the machine learning models and the analytics workloads is what we take care of in our team.
Okay, thank you, Indrani. So I'll pick up on the question that Andy was answering, and then I'll go to Nazia with the same question. But Andy, we'll keep it with you for now. Is tell us a little bit about of all the exciting developments that are happening all the time in the world of advanced analytics, AI, machine learning, data science. What excites you the most in the context of the banking domain?
I would say chatbots and specialized advice.
Okay, Indrani, same question for you.
For me, I think it's trying to implement more real-time analytics.
Okay, great. So Nazia, yes, this is where we had left off when we went back to the panelist who joined us. So Nazia, same question for you. Tell us about what you think is the most exciting innovations and developments happening in advanced analytics.
I think it's very exciting all around. There's a world of opportunities at this point in time. So banks, if we start to divide up how banks are, it can be divided up into three different areas. So you have front office, you have middle office, back office. And there are options for AI in all three areas that are extremely exciting. So if you look at front to middle office, there's an opportunity for amazing cost savings and more tailored customer experiences. So banks are leveraging algorithms on the front end for better customer identification, authentication, mimicking live employees through chatbots, voice assistants, and also deepen customer relationships through understanding their their patterns of behavior, etc. So there's the ability to provide more personalized insights and recommendations to a client. There's also, as you mentioned, and as Ronnie mentioned, as well as Andy, like there's all this opportunity in fraud, then in AML. And these are also very, very exciting because in the past, these were very manual and they were not as effective. And finally, there's a lot of opportunities in underwriting as well, because AI can analyze instantaneously as new data becomes available, and it can optimize risk management for banks. So there's so many opportunities across all the different areas that it's a very exciting time to be in banks for AI.
Thank you, Nazia. That's excellent. And Andy, I'd like to start the next question with you. So we hear about opportunities, and certainly that then incentivizes a lot of the executives and leaders within banks to want to experiment with and explore the creative applications of these innovative technologies. But everybody also has to be mindful of challenges. Everybody also has to be mindful of limitations. So can you touch a little bit on what are some of the challenges and limitations that leaders and executives in banks need to be aware of when they're thinking about driving these advanced analytics initiatives in their organizations?
Yeah, Vic, I think it's not a stranger for any of us, the limitations and some of those capabilities that were not previously available for enabling advanced analytics. If I just touch on maybe the top three, we have historically struggled with data silos, what we also know it as data gravity. The other aspect has been always maybe having a lack of compute power. And then the third one, which is the key in deploying AI models into production, really has been our legacy systems and how we can interact with them and deploy AI models within these legacy system to really move them into production. But I would say Scotia has come a long way from tackling these three issues by launching our global data and advanced analytics platform last year. So with that platform, nowadays our data scientists and ML engineers don't have to be limited to where the data was, because previously they were limited to deploying their models where the data resides. But with this capability, not only they have access to a centralized data, but also they can share it among the teams and be able to leverage these reusable data sets. So that's one of the limitations that we had and we have overcome. And then on the second piece, knowing that we have this global AI platform now, which is a combination of on-prem and on-cloud solution design, would help us to be able to to have that flexible compute power that a lot of times is needed for our data scientists to be able to deploy models. So now they are not so much worried about the solution design, but rather on solving the business problem. So that is very exciting. Again, the same platform has enabled us to deploy APIs to be connected with these legacy systems. We all know very well banking industry's backbone is these legacy systems that have been very stable, have been performing well, but maybe are lacking some flexibility to be able to interact with these AI models. And what we are looking forward to is the fact that we now have the API capabilities to be able to interact with them. Because what is key is for any AI model, what you need is that closed feedback loop to see how the customer is interacting with the decision that you have put in front of them, or your frontline staff are deciding on some of the decisions or offers that you put in front of them. So it's important to be able to close that loop. And I would say it's a journey for all of us to get there and overcome these three main issues.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Andy. Nazia, same question for you. You take a strategic lens, you take an innovative view across the bank, enterprise view into the challenges and limitations. So tell us a little bit about what some of these challenges and limitations and obstacles are in the bank.
I completely agree with Andy, where some of the data silos and the ability to access some of the legacy platforms has always been a challenge, but now we have the technology to do so. But one of the biggest challenges I have seen in banking with trying to do AI is the lack of data management and data quality, because data has traditionally been a byproduct of process and technology in banking. You use data to fulfill a product as opposed to using it for AI. AI applications require there to be a certain level of completeness and consistency and quality to be able to provide the right recommendations. And the banking landscape is very complicated, very fragmented, and the processes are fragmented because at times it just becomes manual. It's automated, then manual, then it goes back into a system of record. And I believe these are some of the biggest limitations and challenges that banks have to overcome. They have to start looking at data as an asset, as a product in itself that requires the same care that they provide for any other product.
Thank you, Nazia. And Indrani, I'll ask you the same question, which is that you bring a deep technical background to the table. You've taken many production applications from idea to implementation, design to deployment. Tell us a little bit about advanced analytics. What are some of the challenges from a technologist perspective or limitations that leaders and executives in banks need to be aware of?
First, all of these problems that Andy and Nazia mentioned, I totally, completely get it. But in addition to that, I think it's getting really hard for any AI workflow to kind of take the standard development approach, where you're having developers work on some workflows, and it's not just a model. It's not like we have data readily available, all of transformed and catered to a certain model, and it's made readily available for some people, for the data scientists to kind of work on it, right? So it's these processes take more of a software development approach as well, where you would need to design pipelines. And the problem here we have always is roles and responsibilities. Can you see the data? Can you not see the data? Can you is this data personally identified information? Or is it what should we do with it? Like, should we mask it? Should we not mask it? And it becomes much more of a complex and not so a cumbersome problem when you're dealing much more with like the cloud, and taking a hybrid approach between the cloud and on-prem resources. And also, where do you need to process? Do you have to do them on-prem or the cloud, right? So I think that is basically where we're having a lot of challenges. And it's not just an approach problem that we're taking. It has to be a wider acceptance that there are these new kind of roles, and the roles and responsibilities of different people, they might be different, but we still have to kind of separate them out to kind of ensure security. We're meeting security standards. So we're big on there's a lot of security and regulations that we need to follow in the bank. And I think that's and trying to get all of this done while kind of adhering to them is kind of the biggest challenge, I think.
Thank you, Indrani. That's great. So, Nazia, for the next question, I'd like to build on something that all of you have said, and particularly great way for Indrani to wrap it up in this notion of sort of rules and regulations. We know that in banking, it's a heavily regulated industry, lots of compliance, lots of monitoring, lots of oversight, and quite often the impression that folks have, and I've had these conversations with leaders in banks, is that there are a lot of rules and regulations that can sometimes inhibit innovation. They can stifle that kind of strategic transformational advancement in the bank's technology portfolio. So keeping that in mind, understanding that banks have specific rigors and strictures around the rules and regulations, how do you reconcile sort of some of the capabilities, the innovative capabilities that advanced analytics bring to the table, while at the same time recognizing that banks are in fact heavily regulated and have to follow rules and regulations? Nazia, over to you.
Thanks, Vic. Regulations play a critical role in banking. The reason why our clients trust us with their money is because we are regulated, we are governed. It gives them a sense of reassurance to know that we do is monitored by a government body. The use of AI in analyzing our personal data for recommending a new financial product can't be seen the same light as Netflix recommending the next movie you should watch. There's a level of criticality and seriousness in the service banks provide to its clients' livelihood, and the impact that it has on their day-to-day makes AI much more of an intricate strategy with a lot of nuances that you have to consider. So we are seeing, and we will continue to see more privacy regulations come our way, similar to GDPR. And the trend is headed towards a much more regulated use of data, analytics, and AI in banking. So the current trend that we're seeing is really focused on consumer protection. So when you're using AI to recommend a product, you will start to see that regulations are starting to ask not just how you came up with that decision on behalf of a person, but was that the right decision made for that client? Was that loan that was approved the right product for the client, as opposed to, say, a credit card? The way banks are still innovating with this is being cautious about what problems we're tackling with AI first. So many of the things such as fraud, et cetera, are, there's a reason why they were the first ones to go through. With the recommendation engines and so on, we will see that, measure twice, cut once approach that banks always take, because we are risk averse by nature. So we will see more of that, but I don't think it will stifle innovation, as banks in Canada have been very innovative with AI.
Thank you, Nazia. That's excellent. And Indrani, since you raised this point in your previous answer, so I'll come to you and ask you the same question: is, in your professional opinion, what is the connection between the ability for banks to innovate with advanced analytics while also existing within a system of rules and regulations?
I think the best approach, and what everybody is right now following, is while we're kind of while we have all of these rules that we're bound to. I think we're starting by we're starting and experimenting in silos, like in the sense that we're taking data, we're trying to build models, we're trying to show value, and then once there's value, it could be anything, right? Could be things like wherever your whatever system is trying to kind of approve your credit card. So we're trying to take problems like this within the bank, and then trying to see where ML can help, and then trying to we're trying to come up with a solution to it. At the same time, that part is actually the easiest part, but we'll have to take this one step forward, and then prove that we're passing all of the regulations. We're saying we're having some kind of an explainability in our models, and then we're trying to say that, hey, our we're doing at least a good job, or at least a comparable job to the systems that we already have in place, to kind of say that this model is good enough, or this model is explainable, this meets our standards. So I think we're there. We're halfway through. I think when we tackle that part, I think it'll be much easier.
Thank you, Indrani. And same question for you, Andy. Is the impact of the strict rules and regulations in banks on the acceptance and adoption of advanced analytics in the enterprise? Andy, are you on mute?
Yes, I was on mute. Thank you. I would echo Indrani and Nazia's comment. What I would also add is the fact that we know that AI rewards are going to be enormous. We can definitely benefit a lot from AI, but these benefits and rewards should not come at an expense of our core values. So as much as we all are aware, industry leaders from finance, not just finance industry, but other industries, are working with academic partners as well as regulatory bodies to come up with a set of policies and governance around building AI models to basically give data scientists and analytics department and technology departments within the bank some safeguards in terms of what your models should be. But these policies and governance structure is required because they would ensure the model that is built is not only safe, but also scalable. So if you imagine all the internal and external policies that we will have on AI, on adapting AI and having an ethical AI is going to be really based upon a few points that they have mentioned, making sure that it is safe from a privacy and security perspective, making sure it's explainable, making sure that it is adaptable, but not just adaptable, but also constrainable, what we also know it as a human in the loop. And being able to make sure the model is accountable and fair is going to be the core pillars for an AI model, and therefore it will derive a lot of these internal and external policies. So all of these would ensure that our customer will continue to have the trust that they have in us in keeping their data and having the experience that they want to have with the banking industry, at the same time making sure that we have mitigated any risk for our shareholders.
Thank you, Andy. So the next question, we'll start with Indrani. So Indrani, you mentioned in one of the previous answers, you touched on ML ops, and you basically alluded a little bit to some of the similarities between a traditional software development initiative and the differences and the similarities with a machine learning or an advanced analytics initiative. We know that a lot of people, when they learn sort of on their computers, they learn on notebooks, interactive code notebooks, but there's a big gap in going from a notebook to a production class, industrial strength, enterprise grade server. So can you tell us a little bit about, for folks that are starting out or are considering careers in this space, in the banking context, what the main considerations are? They've learned sort of in one way, and now they need to bring their skills and apply them into a corporate IT landscape. What kind of advice and pointers would you give them, Indrani?
Good question. Really, I mean, in terms of the technical abilities and the technical skills, I think to be honest with you, because of lot of different environments, a lot of different platforms, be it cloud or on-prem, there's actually more than one way of doing things, and there's a lot of special tools and new tooling that's available these days. It's also what I would think is very important is to learn a technology. I mean, this is for people who want to learn and fit in an organization, is to learn something in a platform agnostic way. So if you were to take, say, notebook, instead of just doing it on your computer, if you could build a Docker image, and then I'm getting a bit too technical, but if you could have a container running, you could take that and run it anywhere. You could run it on prem on a Kubernetes cluster, or you could do that on a cloud environment. So learning something and in a platform agnostic way is the best way for devs or data scientists or data engineers. The other thing I would say is to have build quite a bit of domain knowledge, because that I see within banking is very, very important. It's not just the domain knowledge, but also a bit of a history to how things were like how things were working, or how things have happened always traditionally within a department. And it's very different from department to department, because we all, like, the banks kind of work in silos, and they have their own way of doing things, so that can help you a lot. And the third thing I would say is to have actually to know the big picture of where your solution fits or what you're ultimately trying to achieve, so you can always try to find other ways to do the same thing. And this, to me, I kind of learned it myself, organically in a bank, is that usually there's a lot of parties that you need to include when you're designing a solution. It's like you'll have architecture, you'll have info security, you'll have everybody. So everybody, everybody will chip in their conditions and necessities, and then you'll have to find an alternative way if the what you planned doesn't fit their requirements. So as long as you are aware of what you're doing and know the big picture, and there's more than one ways of doing things, you can always find a solution. So those are my three things that I wanted to mention today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, Indrani. So, Andy, I'll ask you the same question from the context of when you have folks that have learned on sort of notebook environments, and they want to now learn, they want to understand how it is that it actually works in a bank, in a large enterprise like that. What kind of advice would you give them in terms of what do they need to keep in mind? Is there something else that they need to learn beyond what they might have learned in some boot camp or in some classroom setting?
Yeah, Vic, I would say depending on the role that this individual is applying for, knowing that an AI model is a product of a cross-functional team, it depends which person in this cross-functional team or which persona do you want to be. As we all know, these cross-functional teams would have product owners from the business a lot of times. You would have data engineers, analysts, you have machine learning and DevOps, and also security and privacy folks that are part of this life cycle of this AI model. So depending on which persona do you want to be, the banks have come a long way to be able to, when we post a job and the job requirements for a special role, we have come a long way to make sure that depending on which persona are we hiring for, the requirements are specific for this persona. It could be as technical as DevOps engineers, or it could be as a business focus as the product owner of this initiative. But what is key is no matter which of these personas you decide to be, you need to have, if you decide to work in a banking industry, you need to have definitely a basic knowledge of bank products, how the bank have historically operated, back to what Indrani mentioned, as well as having some good statistical background, because no matter which role you pick, statistics is going to be your best friend, and mixing it with the domain knowledge, it would be really good. But again, it really depends on which persona do you want to be, and really looking at the requirements of the job.
Thank you, Andy. And same question for you, Nazia. You lead teams and you've hired and recruited top talent into the enterprise. So tell us a little bit about what you look for and how you advise folks that you're interviewing or recruiting, how they can be successful in the intake process, but also in the long term when it comes to the roles associated with advanced analytics in banks.
It's fair to say that banks are overall worse to a fault. I mean, when code has an issue, say in Netflix, if Netflix hangs, you exit, you go back in. But if something goes wrong with code in banking, it's someone's mortgage not being paid, not being deposited. It has real impacts on the client. So we are extra careful with any code getting deployed. From a technical perspective, the deployment is very broadly very similar, but it is actually what both Andy and Ronnie were touching on. Working in a banking culture is about partnerships. It's about collaborations. It's about having your security partners there, your architects there. Depending on the role you're playing in that build, you have to partner with all these other individuals. So when hiring, one of the things I really look for is soft skills, whether they are able to, along with their technical skills, whether they are able to partner up with various teams who are going to be part of this process. And that ability really differentiates from other smaller organizations. And the soft skills are a critical skill set to have in a bank.
Thank you, Nazia. So we'll keep it with you for now, and then maybe ask the same question from the other direction. I think yourself and Indrani and Andy all mentioned what you look for in candidates and what kind of advice you'd give them to be successful. Let's ask the other way around then. What are some of the red flags that you would like to tell folks that maybe one day sitting across the interview table from you? What are things that are red flags to you in terms of folks applying for advanced analytics type jobs in the banking context? Nazia, you first.
One of the things that I would look for, as starting off with soft skills, and also one of the red flags would be the inability to be fluid in your basically openness to things. A lot of the problems we're trying to solve in banking, they haven't been solved before. And there are a lot of individuals in there, lots of ideas, they're subject matter experts. The ability to be open to listening to everyone to solve that problem is a critical skill set. If in an interview, if I see someone who is very closed off, set in their ways, they would really struggle with the change that the banks are going through when bringing in AI, and it would be a struggle for them. And also the ability to work in an environment that is structured. If they're unable to work in an environment that has a lot of processes, that has a lot of individuals, so something that you can easily deploy quickly by yourself in a bank, it will take you a little bit longer. So patience really helps, the ability to work with various teams. These are those capabilities I look, and if I don't see that in a candidate, that's often a red flag.
Thank you for that, Nazia. Andy, same question for you.
What I would say is, and I will go back to the days which I was a data scientist. It's sometimes difficult to be the person in the room who has maybe some technical skills and basic domain knowledge, but at the same time being in the room trying to solve a business problem, who all the partners at the table know so much more about the problem than you do and the process that exists. So what is key, what I usually look for in a candidate, or I think is a key, is for that candidate to be humble, to understand that there will be a lot of situations that they may be the only or the most technical person in the room, while they have all the other experts, the business experts, the process experts in the room, and the technology experts. But you understanding that you're there to solve a piece of this puzzle, and organizationally solving problems are usually complex. So understanding and acknowledging that you are just a piece of this complex puzzle and you're trying to work together with other parties is going to be key. So being humble is important. And also a lot of times resilience is key, knowing that, as Nazia mentioned, being part of a banking industry, things are going to move at a certain speed. You can speed it up to a certain degree, but there are a lot of parties that are involved, a lot of security and privacy that needs to be passed, but making sure that the candidate understands that this is different than how maybe a startup can operate, or maybe they have operated in a specific project on. So being resilient is also important. The third one, which is usually very important for us, is common sense. Knowing what to expect. Like a lot of times, if you know a person would run a specific statistics or analysis and they would come up with a certain number, but being able to double check that number in their brain to see, does this make sense? Like, was I expecting this? To have an expectation of what is the results going to be is also important. So those three, I guess, are what I look for and treat as red flag.
Thank you, Andy. And Indrani, same question for you in terms of some of the red flags that you would warn job seekers to be careful about.
Communication, very important, as Nazia and Andy mentioned. Um, so often I find that you could be a great engineer or a data scientist, but it requires most times it actually requires you to go usually involve it involves scouting for certain information or data from multiple people. So if you're not a kind of a person who can communicate and have those soft skills, it can get very hard. As it is, things are quite slow because of the nature and the size of the organization and all that kind of stuff. But that is very important, because that can be a big showstopper if you're not good with communication skills. The other thing is that there could be restrictions with the tooling that you could use, especially because every tool technically every tool that comes into the bank, it goes through some kind of scrutiny, so you are kind of bound, like you have to work with it. But any smart data scientist or a smart data engineer would be able to work. So trying to be innovative, coming up with different solutions to solve the same problem, that's something that I would look at. But otherwise, with respect to soft skills, I think communication, just the attitude is very important. Always hire for the attitude, more so in a bank, because your attitude will matter a lot and it'll pay you off in the long term.
Thank you, Indrani. Those are great words of wisdom. Andy, for the next question, I'd like to start with you, which has to do with all of you touched on the importance of sort of explainability, interpretability when it comes to advanced analytics in the banking context. Privacy is important, fairness, debiasing are important. So tell us a little bit about what kind of an approach do you take when you are either designing a system or building a system that has to do with this kind of advanced analytics in a bank. Is how do you fit the notions of explainability, interpretability, privacy, debiasing, fairness into the design process? We hear quite often that folks sort of design a system, put it in production, and then all of this stuff is hindsight only until it becomes a huge issue for them. Folks also touched on GDPR. So Andy, tell us a little bit about where in that design process, where in the value chain these important concepts come into play and how you actually fold them into the process.
For sure, Vic. As I mentioned before, there are a lot of, I would say, pillars that an AI model has to be built on. And depending on which pillar you're really talking about, whether it's on the safeness and the security, or whether it's on the explainability, there are different things to have in mind. If I were to say what is the most important thing, I would say having the right parties at the table. So ensuring that you have engaged privacy and security, the first thing you do as you are scoping out the project, to ensure this is something, the tools that you're using, the environment that you're using, the kind of data and PII information that you are bringing into your model needs to be blessed and reviewed by privacy and security team, just to be sure. And it's not these two are not partners for one time, and it's not one and done. They need to be your partners along the way, because at every step, as you are evolving the tool or the environment that you're going to be deploying these models, they will be your best partners to keep you within those safeguards that I mentioned. So that's one. The second one is, I would say, having data partners and folks with different mindset. These are folks, it could be an inclusive environment that you bring in your business partners, your data partners, your analytics partners all together to say, this is what we want to do, this is how we are planning to tackle it. Because ensuring that there is no there is no bias in the data that you're collecting or you're treating, as well as having an inclusive approach to how you are trying to solve, or the business logics that you are going to put in place for any mapping that you're going to do, is going to be important to make sure that the end result is not going to come at anybody's surprise. So, and then maybe the third one I would say is testing and running a lot of these with massive, training your model with massive amount of data, and also testing before going live.
Thank you, Andy. And Nazia, same question for you. You've done a lot of work on governance. So where do these concerns of privacy, explainability, interpretability, debiasing, fairness, where do they fit into the way that you manage these processes?
Rick, in the past, it was you put things into production and things come back to you. But the new way of working is that you start to partner with privacy. You start to partner with the right data teams right away at the beginning. It does slow things down a bit. So when you have so many different partners, you are trying to solve a problem, you bring them along on that journey, and you discuss all the challenges and things that might happen or things that are relevant to it right up front. But you are bringing them along on that journey. You're getting their perspectives. And that's the thing about banks. It is very federated. There's lots of functions. They are all very focused on a specific lens on that problem, and just identifying the right stakeholders and partners right up front, bringing them in, working through the problem with them at the beginning in that ideation type of stage, when you have some sort of an idea of what you're about to go solve, it really shapes the path for when you're in execution. Everyone is aware of what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish. So that really helps. The second part of it is the feedback loop and the ability and the flexibility to be able to change as well. Putting that structure in place is the second bit that I've always focused on.
Thank you, Nazia. And same question for you as well, Indrani, is basically this question of you mentioned MLOps, and certainly there's an emphasis on speed. You certainly want to get to value as quickly as possible with these advanced analytics solutions, but at the same time, we know the importance of these topics around privacy, fairness, etc. So how do you reconcile those and bring them all at the same time?
Yeah, so that's it's a good question, because these things have been in the bank for a while now. It's just not, it's just not that there were like AI models. Like, we've had like SaaS based workflows for a very long time in banks and other finance companies. The thing is that I think there needs to be more of an adaptation for having teams like the traditional model validation or risk validation teams who are already doing this kind of thing, which were responsible for validating models of models coming out of a certain department, like fraud models or credit risk models. They've always been there. They've been doing that thing. So I think we need to take a learn from there and adapt it to have newer like frameworks to kind of validate models built in newer frameworks, and also try to maybe how do I say, maybe to take certain libraries which are traditionally really good for validating and making them a standard, just like how we had built standards and we've been following them for a while now in the bank. I think it's time we make that team and adapt those new frameworks as well as a part of the validation. It's a long process, but it once that's done and that's established, it becomes a lot more organic way or approach to validating models, because there's going to be so many of them, and clearly somebody has to keep track of all of these things, and you can't really leave it to the developers or the people who actually develop these models and leave it to them.
That's great, Indrani. Thank you. And on this topic of so many models, I can't resist but mentioning you brought up the topic of Docker and containers, and as portable and compact as they are, that's the other thing that happens with containers too, is you make one and the next thing you look around and you come back and there's like 1,000 of them. But certainly great point there. So the next question, Nazia, I'd like to start with you. And this has to do with the fact that the field of advanced analytics, we said this at the beginning, everyone's agreed, is advancing rapidly. There's new innovations that software firms and technology vendors are putting out all the time. Other industries are also innovating very rapidly. With all of this change, Nazia, how do you keep up to speed? What's your personal strategy for staying on top of all of these fast-moving, rapidly changing advancements that are coming out, many of which may be relevant to creating value for your enterprise? So what's your strategy? What are some sources? What do you read? Who do you watch? Tell us a little bit about that.
I think my second job teaching at U of T, where I teach data governance, has really helped with this. I've been in a bank for a long time, so I did start to feel that I was focusing in on everything banks were doing. But when I started to teach, I realized that a lot of the inspiration should be coming from what the other sectors are doing, whether it's the retail sector, healthcare sector. So I do spend a lot of time reading articles on the internet. So, for example, my latest obsession is with the data mesh architecture and how that can be applied in various industries. But I read a lot of articles online. I think also I constantly keep up with Coursera, where it's free and you can learn about any topic that you want. But one of the things that is my biggest takeaway in innovation is that not a lot of innovation is really new. It's happened somewhere else, but you take that idea and you are able to innovate in your own industry. So I always look out for ideas in other areas as opposed to just look within what banks are doing.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Nazia. So, Andy, I'd ask you the same question, and it's interesting. Nazia gave us the organizational version of transfer learning, that ideas are proliferating outside, and then you figure out how to bring them into your enterprise. So, how do you keep up with all of the changes, Andy? What kind of sources do you refer to? Are there particular thought leaders you watch regularly? How do you stay on top of the latest developments?
For sure. I think, Vic, what I'm always excited about is knowing what's going on in the fintech world and kind of following some of our competitors and just being able to see what they are deploying, what they are doing to enhance their customer service and customer experiences. At the same time, as Nazia mentioned, there is a lot of advancement that is happening outside of banking, like healthcare and retail industries specifically. So just following the news, and there's a lot of sources for them. But also one of the things that I often do is to go to GitHub and kind of see what has been newly developed that has a lot of traction, just to understand how the model has built, what is it doing, and keeping myself up to date.
Thank you, Andy. And Indrani, same question for you is, how do you stay in tune with the latest and greatest developments in the field?
Muted. Okay, so apart from following some really popular tech blogs, I've subscribed to Medium, so I read a lot of articles, and the reason why I like these articles on Medium are they're not just concepts, they're not just like textbook concepts. There are things that people have tried out, and they're like kind enough to put what with their learnings on as an article. So there's opportunity for us to kind of fail fast and find out, because of the pace of which things happen in a bank. I want to always choose a solution or a way that I know it works, because there's not really scope for failing too much, because as it is, the processes can take quite some time. So you want to be able to learn from those articles, and then try to see how you can bring them in, even if it's making a marginal difference. I would still consider it, because that's how we've always found success in doing certain things, is to kind of improve them marginally, and you find and you pave a way towards your end goal.
Okay, thank you, Indrani. So for the last question then, Andy, I'd like to start with you. And this has to do with the fact that there are a lot of AI strategy frameworks out there. We know that professional services firms have such frameworks. We know the World Economic Forum has such a framework. So there's many AI strategy frameworks. When you are working on the strategic aspects of advanced analytics, is there a particular framework that is your go-to? And if not necessarily, then what are some of the characteristics that you look for in an AI strategy framework that you think these are the essential building blocks all AI strategy frameworks need to have to be useful in your mind? So what are some of those characteristics that an AI framework would need to have?
I would say a strategic framework for AI would have it definitely has to cover certain areas which are core and key to being able to deploy them successfully. So knowing that we have solved for data and the compute power that is required is going to be key. So those technology solutions, platform, or architecture design is going to be one of those items that I would look for to make sure that the banking or the strategy understands where in the maturity stages are their data, their analytics capabilities, and if they are not at a mature stage, how are we building up to get to the 100% or where we want to be? So data and analytics platform and the technology is going to be one of them. The second one is going to be around, I would say, recruitment and talent. So making sure that there is a talent acquisition and strategy around not just acquiring these talent, but also retaining the talent that comes into the banking. Those two are going to be key. And then the other piece, which is key to any AI model, is what problem are we trying to solve for? So historically, knowing there should be always a pipeline of business use cases that should get prioritized. And depending on the strategy that the bank has put out for a specific business line, we need to know what are some of those goals that that have been prioritized, that are top of mind for the executives, and making sure that it's a pipeline of use cases and not only just one-offs or something that will just show up in the middle of nowhere and there's going to be a lot of planning around it. So those three are going to be the pillars.
Thank you, Andy. And Nazia, same question for you: is what in your mind are the characteristics of a good AI strategy framework?
My based on my role, which has been focused on the governance around AI and analytics, some of the things that I have brought to the table in terms of in terms of what we need to do has been around metadata management, data privacy, data security, as well as what the data architecture needs to be. These are some of it's very standard data governance framework that we brought forth. But while data governance in the past had such a regulatory lens to it, we are actually reimagining a lot of that with an analytics and AI lens to it. For example, metadata management and data discovery, all of these things mean something completely different in the AI and analytics space as opposed to what you're doing for regulatory. But we're also bringing forth that if you really want to open up, for example, data to everyone and you want to be able to protect privacy, so PII, what's the strategy now where you can open up data to everyone easily? So data scientists from different silos areas can actually access the data without you worrying at every level, do you have controls and processes in place? But those are some of the standard frameworks that I've personally participated in when it comes to AI and analytics that we're embedding within our practice.
Thank you for that, Nazia. And Indrani, same question for you.
Okay. So the first thing the first thing that I would say is more about data. So one thing that I think we'll need to really work on, or like we've already started to work on, is the fact that data is really not very accessible. Sometimes it can take quite an effort to kind of even discover the data sources we have, or because there are so many source systems. It's like having a catalog where you can really go search for what you need. Making that accessible can is something that would I would imagine would become probably a de facto thing in the next few years. Like in places like the banks where there is like a centralized repository for data, you would imagine it's there, but there's a lot more than that. There's also a lot of data that's in silos, and probably not every data source is out there in the centralized repository. So having access to where the data is, what the data is quite good, good to start with. The other thing is that, sure, I mean, you don't give everybody access to have the data and then play around with it, and have access to it, because they could be sensitive data and whatnot. But giving some kind of an environment, like a workspace, or one of those a place where people can play around with data, but different businesses, I think that should become pretty standard. Because right now we have a lot of teams who really want to do data science, or even want to try out, but it's unless they get access to a certain, like, unless they follow a certain path, get access to certain, like, tables on a centralized repository, or have certain kind of an environment, because they're restricted, they can't do so many things on the laptop. All that kind of stuff is like a bit of a they kind of inhibit people from trying out things. So having access to data, knowing where it is, what it is, so you don't have to kind of only go by knowledge of your team members, but also kind of go and explore things, as well as having a place where you can try out modeling, are two key items. Once you know that, or once you have a signal in a certain model, or once you know certain idea is working, then you can take that conversation to a broader group and say, hey, we want to kind of partner with a technology team, or we want to do so and so, and then have other discussions around it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Indrani. And we are getting close to the top of the conversation. Time always flies when you're having a great discussion, especially when you're talking to your friends. So with this, I'd like to thank all of you for taking time in your busy schedule, Nazia, Indrani, Andy, for joining us and sharing your insights and foresight with us. I know our audience will find this to be a very thoughtful and thought-provoking conversation. So we'd love to have you back in a couple of months so you can give us a bit more of an updated lay of the land. So with that, thank you so much for making your time, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.